Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. I want to apologize that I haven't really been releasing much over the last couple weeks. I've just been really bogged down with school since we gotten back. There's been a lot of assignments and they're piling up assignments and finals on top of each other. Well, not even really finals because we go back and finish up the semester after Christmas break. But that's why I haven't really been able to post much. My last episode I posted was the one about mental health where I was talking to my wife, which was an archived one. And then I tried making one this weekend, but I was so busy with school that I still have not finished editing it. So I didn't even get a chance to. I'm probably not going to post it. Or I'll post a few things from it. Maybe I'll sort of merge this with a few things I talked about from my other podcast. Anyway, so we got a few different things to talk about today. The first one I'm going to open up with is just a little bit of an update. So over the last couple days, there has been a by-election that has taken place inside of Canada. There were 4 open seats for MPs to win. And as the results have come in, it turns out that the Liberal government has won 3 out of the 4 federal by-elections. So the Conservatives were the one who ended up winning the 4th seat, but 3 of them went to the Liberals. So that was not exactly what I was hoping to see. I mean, I'm not a conservative, right? But right now, I'd rather see the Conservatives winning seats over the Liberals because they're at least sitting in a better position in my eyes than Justin Trudeau is. And Jagmeet Singh is, so far, I've not been impressed. Ever since he got into the running, I was never impressed with him. And just since he's become leader and more has come out, I've been even less impressed. Considering how he doesn't really disavow the Air India bomber, which from, I think it was the 80s, where it killed like 260 Canadians. And he already has a shit relation with India right now. So not exactly the guy I want to see in political power. That's not a good start if you're just getting into federal politics right now, and that's already your record. So between all of them, Scheer wouldn't even be a guy that I'd want to vote for, but right now, if I'm talking about parties and who I have to vote for, I'd rather vote for Conservatives over Liberals and NDP. If Mulcair was still in the race, that would be a different story. I'm sure that Mulcair probably would pique my interest more over Scheer, but he's not, he's gone, so. So the 4 seats that were available for running was in Newfoundland and Labrador. It was the Bonavista, Burin, and Trinity running. And then in the Toronto riding, we had Scarborough and Agincourt. And then in British Columbia, it was the riding of South Surrey and White Rock. As for the thing was about the South Surrey and White Rock, it was actually a Conservative MP who was elected beforehand and who stepped down. So the Conservatives were hoping to regain this riding, but in fact it turned red and it went towards the Liberals. And as for the Conservatives, the seat that they won was the Battleford-Lloydminster seat. So those were our 4 ridings, and Liberals got 3 out of the 4. This kind is that's not very good for the Conservatives because they also got beat out in a by-election earlier this year, which they were hoping to gain some extra seats out of, but the Liberals ended up gaining the upper hand in that one, and then they beat them out again in this by-election. So not really going in the way the Conservatives have hoped. And it's a little interesting because the headlines for Trudeau have not been very good over the last few months, and just for the Liberal Party in general, it's been one problem after the other, one controversy after the other. So it's surprising to see this. However, one thing that this article from iPolitics is saying, which is sort of hinting to, is that the problem may be is that a lot of the people that are voting for the Liberals, that the Liberals grabbed, are people that are not particularly interested in politics themselves. But these are people who will still go out and at least vote. You know, they just don't pay attention to the headlines throughout the year. So it's believed that the Liberals have capitalized on this demographic of people. And therefore, the fact they don't pay attention to question period, they don't pay attention to the news, their opinions never really change. It's just Trudeau and his Liberals are the one that have kind of put in the footwork in the early 2010s when he ran for... when he was running for head of the Liberals in 2012. Him and his people were putting in the groundwork with this demographic in order to get him on their side. So that way, they will vote Liberal. And this seems to be working for him, because again, if they're not paying much attention to what's going on, not really paying attention to what the Conservatives are hammering the Liberals over, or what the Liberals really are trying to do then they're not really going to change their opinion. So this might have actually been a pretty good demographic for Trudeau to go after. Although for the rest of us that actually kind of pay attention to this shit, it's very frustrating to see. It's very frustrating to see that our government, which is trying to push so many bad policies, both economically and just in the social circle, when they're pushing so many bad policies and some of them dangerous, it's really upsetting to see that people don't take notice. So what I'd like to do maybe is sort of put together a montage of just short clips of things that Trudeau does, stupid things that he wants to enforce, and sort of put them out there, because if people aren't paying attention, then maybe they'll pay attention to flashy videos that are about 30-second longs with a bit of entertainment for them. Maybe I'll turn it into a Vine. I hear Vine's making a comeback, so maybe we'll make a Vine. That's what we'll do. So it looks like the Conservatives are going to have to step up their game a little bit in order to get people's attention. How to do this, I'm not exactly sure. It doesn't just seem that they'll be able to do the groundwork themselves. It seems like the Liberals have done a pretty good job at getting them over on their side. They'll have to do a better job at informing the Canadian public of the dangers that is coming from Trudeau's Liberals and their policies. But once again, how do you do this? Do they take to YouTube in order to get this message out? There's plenty of politicians on Twitter, but I don't know how many people that aren't interested in politics really follow a politician. I follow many politicians on Twitter because that way it's easier to get information as to what's going on in politics. It's worked for me. There's been plenty of times I've seen tweets by MPs that have gotten me onto a certain subject. And a good example of this is also a good segue into the next story I want to talk about. And one of the MPs I've talked about before on the podcast is Michelle Rempel. You know, I think her Twitter's pretty entertaining. I think she's a smart woman who has a good heart. So I like her as a politician. Well, recently she put out tweets where she was talking about a policy she was trying to push inside the House of Commons. I could not believe that this actually was being pushed back against, but recently we've been hearing that certain things are going to be taken out of the Canadian Citizenship Guide. The Canadian Citizenship Guide is just quite simply a guide that is given to new arrivals in order to know what is the proper conduct in Canada, certain things that are unacceptable here. And anyway, Justin Trudeau and his Liberals were trying to get female genital mutilation taken out of the Canadian Citizenship Guide, thereby making it they would take it out from underneath being listed as a barbaric practice. I should say this doesn't really surprise me because a few years ago in the House of Commons, I think this was before the 2015 election, when one Conservative MP was making reference to female genital mutilation, how it's barbaric, Justin Trudeau was himself pretty much said, "How dare you call another culture barbaric?" They were talking about cutting off clitorises. That is a barbaric cultural practice, no matter where you are. And I've already seen the thorough debunking of Reza Aslan on what he has to say on it. No, it is very much a Muslim problem. There are millions and millions of girls out there that have had their clitoris cut off. I think the number I heard recently is something like 200 million girls and women across the world that have had their clitoris cut off. That's disgusting. That is a huge number. And I don't like circumcision either. I personally see it either way. A blade to the genitals is a blade to the genitals, so I don't really like circumcision or female genital mutilation. But if we're looking at the effects of female genital mutilation compared to circumcision, it's not much of a comparison. In one case, the circumcision, you're just cutting off a flap of skin. So even though I think it's bad, and there's some bad practices that come along with that on top of it, such as one practice which I believe is starting to die out, and I really fucking hope it is that the moil, after he would cut the foreskin off, is he would suck on the tip of the penis of the baby in order to stop the bleeding. However, in this act, there were plenty of times when sexually transmitted diseases were handed over, such as herpes. Herpes was a good one that was transmitted to infants through rabbis and mohels from doing this. So I think it's a dying out practice. But then we look at female genital mutilation. You're not just cutting off a flap of skin, but you're cutting off a bunch of sensory nodes. You're cutting off a sack of, more than just a sack of cells and a flap of skin. There's a clitoris is very sensitive, and there's a lot of health problems that comes with when you cut it off. Number one, dirty equipment leads to infection, and that's just the beginning. There's plenty of problems that women have afterwards, where if it's not infection, so they have health problems because it doesn't heal properly. It's a disgusting habit. The difference is generally when a boy has circumcision, that's done at a very young age, like within, a few days to a few weeks of being born. But when we're talking about female genital mutilation, now we're talking about girls from 5, 6, 7, 8 years old that are having this done to them. In a young time frame, a point in their life where they could easily remember this happening to them, and they could remember the pain associated with it. It's a lot more awful. And Justin Trudeau and the Liberals want this taken out of the Canadian Citizenship Guide. Michelle Rempel was outraged when she heard this, and she started up a petition on it, Petition E-1310, and this one is that's been signed on by many Canadians. I signed it myself. And this has to do with keeping female genital mutilation as listed as a barbaric practice and as unacceptable in Canada. And I really hope this petition goes on and that does stay in the Citizenship Guide, because I honestly cannot think of anything less Canadian than allowing people to cut off little girls' clitorises. And if you do take that out as a barbaric practice, I have no doubt that we're going to see the amount of girls that do have female genital mutilation acts committed on them. That's going to skyrocket. Without a doubt, I highly believe that is the truth. This is a good example of moral relativism at play. Because one thing why people don't want to label stuff like female genital mutilation as a barbaric practice, well, one thing they say anyway, is that who are we to judge? Who are we to judge another culture, especially a culture that can go back so long way? We do it all the time. I mean, fuck, how often do we judge Christianity? How often do we judge our old ancestors for what they've done? So we're criticizing people, we're criticizing ideas. And we have no problem doing it. Yet when it comes to another culture, one that we don't hail from, we say, who are we to judge? Who are we not to? And I'm completely ripping that off of Sam Harris. Because he did a speech at TED Talk one time where he's talking about this, and he's saying, people say, who are we to judge? Well, who are we not to judge? We have every right to make a judgment call like that. And there are things that we agree with and we don't agree with. The same thing happens in the Middle East. There are things that they like about their culture, and there are things they don't like about our culture. I'm sure there's a few things they like about our culture. But when we go over, we don't get to just bring our culture and do whatever we want in another country. In fact, that's one thing they tell to tourists and everything. You're in another culture, you need to respect their laws. But it seems when it's people coming to our country, we need to be more accommodating to the point where we're prepared to allow female genital mutilation. What's next? Child marriages? Are we going to allow child marriages in Canada underneath certain cultures? Is that going to be seen as acceptable? I fucking hope not. And what possibly made this even fucking worse was a few days ago, Michelle Rempel posted a video to her Facebook. This was from a situation in the House of Commons where she was facing off against the Liberal Minister of Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship, Mr. Hussein. Ahmed D. Hussein, I think. Hussen. I don't think that's Hussein, but yeah, Hussein, I think. Where she very clearly asked her questions. It was about a 9-minute video roughly, and she spent about 7 to 8 minutes of this video repeatedly asking her question to Mr. Hussein about whether this will be taken out of the Canadian Citizenship Guide or not. A very simple question. It's more or less a yes/no answer. They could not give a straight answer. She spent 7 minutes trying to just get is it going to be in the guide or is it not going to be in the guide? And nothing. This all came out of a leaked document of the new Canadian Citizenship Guide, so it's not the complete version. It's not like this is the final draft of everything and it was a leaked version. But if it's not in there, that is pretty fucking concerning for anybody. Because it seems like that would be something very obvious you would have in there, especially considering how widespread it can come from other cultures. So to not have it in the guide would be completely unacceptable. But how many people are really going to take notice of this? At least in the liberal constituents, the people who vote liberal. And I'm not talking about card-carrying liberals, I just mean of the general population who vote liberal. How many of these people are really going to take notice of this sort of thing? How many people have taken notice how high the debt is? Probably not that many. I remember before I really started to get interested in economic politics, I pretty much avoided all financial sections of newspapers and online sites. I just never browsed through them, never took an interest. We could be the richest country in the world or the 20th richest country in the world. We could have the most debt or the least amount of debt, and I would have never have known unless someone told me. And I feel like for a lot of people, that's mostly the way they go about politics. Once every 4 years, they drag their ass outside to go vote. They probably spend the last day or two looking at the papers and, looking online at a candidate, if that much. And then they go out and vote. But other than that, some just have a party that they've always been told is the good party, and then another one that's the bad party, and that's just who to go out and vote for. For instance, one thing at this moment that would encourage me to go out and vote for the Conservative Party, despite the fact I am not a conservative, is the fact that they don't want to push the dangerous policies that Trudeau wants to push. They want to fix the debt because that is a more conservative place to come from. And an economic mindset is more of a conservative mindset. So they want to fix the debt and they want to stop taxing every goddamn little thing. And I'm not a taxation is theft guy at all. I think to some degree we have to pay our taxes in order to have a functioning society, but that doesn't mean absolutely everything has to get taxed to the point where we're worried about having a goddamn Netflix tax in Canada, even though Bill Morneau and the rest of the Liberals said there will not be a Netflix tax. We're still worried that we still haven't had to report on this. This even had to be asked because so much is being taxed these days. I literally today went out to the grocery store and paid on sale at $7 for a goddamn block of cheese. Not like one of those square bricks, like literally the rectangle ones that are about like this goddamn thick. I paid $7 for that and it was supposed to be on sale. Meanwhile, a few months ago when that was on sale, it was like $2 cheaper. What's changed? Probably having to do with the minimum wage hike, I'm going to guess. Canada, or more specifically Ontario, already has its first casualty from the minimum wage hike increase. One business in the Byward market, which has been there for 24 years, is preparing to close its doors by the new year. And if you'll just give me 1 second, I will look it up. I saved it somewhere. Yeah, so it's an article that came out from the Ottawa Citizen on December 11th, so I'm filming this on December 12th, so this was yesterday. And it says, Black Tomato to close after 23 years. Owner blames minimum wage hike. The restaurant, a stalwart of Byward Market dining for 23 years, will close at the end of the month. Quote, it's the minimum wage, absolutely. That will be an $80,000 hit for me just in hours, end quote. Bezerer said. That's one of the owners. Quote, then you have to factor in the gray areas of what all the other stuff that comes through the door is going to cost. Is it going to be 10% more? 15? 20? Who the hell knows? Nobody knows. End quote. Ontario's minimum wage, now $11.60 an hour, climbs to $14 on January 1st and to $15 on January 1st, 2019. Bezerer employs 17 people at the Black Tomato and says he simply can't afford the increased labor cost. That it takes effect in the toughest month of the year for restaurant only makes it tougher. For those who don't live in Ottawa, the Byward Market is like one of the key areas for tourists and for citizens of Ottawa to go to. This is where all our entertainment is. This is where all our bars are. This is a centerpiece of Ottawa, the Byward Market. And on weekends, forget about it. They're packed to the brim everywhere, and the Byward Market is packed to the brim. Now, all the time, shops do open and close. A lot don't make it in the Byward Market. It has to do with how popular you are. But there have been those that have stood for generations, that just because they've been so well. And as we can see, it was 23 years. I think I heard Black Tomato was one of those. Another good one would be Zach's Diners, which is this old 50s style of diners in the Byward Market. I love Zach's Diner. That's where I try and go and eat every time I'm in the Byward Market. But these are the ones that are not supposed to go anywhere. Yet, as you can see, he's clearly blaming Wynne's tax hike that is going to take place in just a few weeks. Or not even tax hike, sorry, the minimum wage hike that's going to take place in just a few weeks, and it's going to significantly hurt employers. In fact, in one of my episodes where I was talking about the minimum wage hike, I don't even think it was that long ago, but I talked about how grocery stores are minimum wage employees. So when all of a sudden usually grocery stores have a lot of employees. So when they suddenly need to pay each employee $3.50 more almost, then what's going to happen to our grocery prices? It's going to go way up, and we're already seeing it. Like I said, thing of cheese, $7, and that's before taxes, and that's after discount, after it's been on sale. Like, come on. Is this what we can expect from now on? And you know what? While we're here talking about Kathleen Wynne, how about let's talk about how Kathleen Wynne has decided to sue Patrick Brown, the leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. She was suing him for defamation for something that he said back in September. Something that she threatened to sue him at the time over, but it's been a few months since then. It's been, 3 months or so since he said this stuff. So what about it has changed that she's prepared to sue him over? Now, in terms of Patrick Brown, he's completely dismissing these charges. He's going like, this is all a publicity stunt, essentially, is what he's saying. He's pretty much saying that and I agree with him, that she's just trying to deflect from all her own controversies, all of her own misdeeds and misgivings and everything that she's done to fuck up the province right now, in my opinion. She's just trying to deflect from all that and put it towards Patrick Brown and be like, look how terrible this guy is. This is a lawsuit that is meant to not actually get anywhere. She's not going to win any real money or anything out of this. It's meant to destroy his character. This is also the same sort of style that is used by Ezra Levant. In my episode I did where I was talking about the problems at Rebel Media a few months ago, I think it was in August when this happened. This was during the implosion when Rebel Media was losing everybody. There was Ezra Levant was caught on hidden tape. And in this, he even talked about a guy from Ottawa that he buried in lawsuits. And the whole point of it was just that the guy's life was ruined. His reputation was ruined. He's drowning in lawyer fees. And everybody doesn't want to work with him now because of this huge lawsuit, blah, 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 blah. So it's a common practice. And this is exactly the style of politics, if you want to call it that Kathleen Wynne is trying to implement on Patrick Brown. So what did Patrick Brown say? What did he do to deserve such a lashback from Kathleen Wynne? What terrible things did he say to her to deserve to be sued for defamation? Not much. So back in September, Brown told reporters he hoped Wynne would give answers about the scandal, maybe when she stands trial, and went on to describe her as a sitting premier sitting on trial. Legal action stems from the comment that Brown made a day before Wynne testified as a witness as a trial in Sudbury, Ontario, involving 2 provincial Liberals, including Wynne's deputy chief of staff, facing Election Act bribe charges. The pair was ultimately acquitted. She actually was going to trial over it, and again, people felt very suspicious about this because it was for, as you could say, Election Act bribery charges. So especially when it comes to elections, when it's somebody especially close to the sitting person in power, it looks pretty damn suspicious. So Patrick Brown is just calling it as he sees it, because so far Wynne has not presented enough proof to show her innocence, while at the same time there doesn't seem to be anything to prove her guilty yet on the issue. But this apparently warranted a huge lawsuit around him. No. Like, once again, defamation of character. Although I think it'd be really funny if the people of Ontario were then to file a lawsuit against Wynne just for a lot of her conduct inside of office. But we'll be coming to an end of that soon, hopefully. Because election time is about 6 months away now, roughly, until this is going on. This is also partly why I think that Kathleen Wynne is starting to bring this up now. I think everything has to do with the time frame. I think if she can get this moving now, people are probably starting to take notice, and then it'll probably come up again, the lawsuit, near roughly right before election time, so it'd be perfect to smear Patrick Brown. If she had done it back in September, then the time frame would have been off. She probably would not, this would come up then, and then maybe just a few months from the election, but then everyone would forget. So I really think this is probably her planning ahead, trying to make good timing as to when the news about this sort of lawsuit she has against Patrick Brown would come out. The other day when I signed in to check the news, check Twitter in the morning, I really thought I was going to be in for another big tragic story. And then it turned out to be mildly entertaining, despite of what happened. And I am, of course, talking about the bomber in Times Square, Manhattan, who tried to get himself into the subway system and blow it up. He seemed to have set up his vest and his bombs improperly. And in the process of trying to detonate a bomb that could have possibly killed hundreds, if not thousands, he ended up blowing up his own nuts. Yeah, so apparently he had rigged the bomb improperly, and when he went to go pull it and essentially commit suicide bomb, he blew off his nuts. He's still alive today. He's in custody and he's alive as it stands. But as you can tell from this picture here, the dude blew off his nuts. Okay, so this shouldn't be funny because this was a terrorist attack that was meant to hurt people. It was meant to kill people. It was another attack on everybody. And in fact, he was triggered by Christmas. Goddamn, seeing Christmas trees and Christmas cheer everywhere was what set him off in order to want to go and commit this bombing act. Holy shit, you want to talk about triggered? I mean, I've gone on my fucking rants about triggering people who don't use triggering in the right way. You know, they say, you've upset me, I'm triggered, and how stupid that is. But I think this is a perfect example of the word triggered, but because if something like a Christmas tree, which has nice colors, bright lights, and, you know, is supposed to bring a smile to people's face, if this pisses you off so much that you've got to go and try and commit a bombing, then you're fucked up in the head. You are fucked up in the head. And you're clearly getting the complete opposite idea out of Christmas than what's supposed to. I'll be the first one to say that Christmas has not been about Jesus' birth for a long time. It's all about, you know, commercialism and capitalism. It's all about how much can you sell. I mean, there was a time when you used to advertise something simple to give to somebody. Now they're telling you, get your fucking kid the next laptop. Spend $1,000 on your one kid. So it's obviously gone past anything remotely like that. But still, the core beliefs and spirit of Christmas remain. You know, you're supposed to be a time when you do nice things for other people. It's supposed to be a time when you think of others. If there's one time out of the year, then let's make that Christmas. Nope. Apparently, Buddy's got to go strap a bomb to his nutsack and go and try and blow some people up. I saw one meme of the bomber from that picture I showed you where he's all curled up, you know, cradling what was his ball sack and his dick, if, you know, he ever really had a true pair. And it said, that time when you think you're getting 70 virgins, instead you're getting 70 years. Because that's pretty much what he was probably thinking. I'm going to go and there's going to be all these hot women I'm going to sleep with. Oh no. But believe me, there'll be a bunch of burly men I'm sure I want to fuck you up the ass, you terrorist fuck. But it is, at the same time, getting to a sad point. Because just this morning, I saw a picture on Twitter which was really sad. It was a father who had his daughter up on her shoulders so she could check out just a little bit away. She could check out the very nicely done Christmas tree at, like, I suppose is like the town square or, you know, City Hall or something. Anyway, one of the reasons she's on her dad's shoulders is because she probably could not see over the wall of armed men that were standing between her and the Christmas tree. Just police officers decked out with, you know, either submachine guns or assault rifles, full goddamn kit. The only thing they may not had was like maybe their full face equipment. They just had their helmets or something. But it was just a line of them with their guns standing in front. And it's like, is this what it's become to? Is this what is supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year? Is this what we got to, where we got to have armed gunmen out so people can go out and enjoy their Christmas time, do their Christmas shopping, and feel that Christmas cheer? What sort of Christmas cheer is that? And it's just at the same time, for a long time, I kind of mock that whole we gotta do this or the terrorist win sort of thing. But in a way, when you see that, where armed gunmen have to be out in front of a Christmas tree because we're afraid somebody's going to blow it up or blow themselves up and take as many people down, do a shooting, drive a car into that area just because there happens to be a Christmas tree, then it actually does feel like the terrorists have won. That over the last few years, as we just watched, as things have been taken away that we can't do anymore, and they're the much basic things. We can't enjoy Christmas anymore. I'm an atheist. I have no religious meaning behind Christmas. Christmas for me might as well be another Thanksgiving, is the best way I could put it. It's a time where I'm happy to be with my family, my friends. I'm happy to, you know, get gifts for them and just have a great time with them. That's what Christmas means to me. It's nothing religious whatsoever. And for me, it has nothing to do with consumerism. In fact, over the last few years, my family and I, we've really started to get away from really getting much for each other. We buy each other a little gift here and there and stocking stuffers, but we don't really go all out anymore. But, you know, we go over and we always have our big family breakfast. And, you know, we spend time, we talk, we laugh. It's a great time. I love Christmas for that. That's what it's always been to me. When I was younger, my parents were not, we weren't like poor, but we weren't we were like, I guess you could kind of say we're probably somewhere in the working class, living paycheck to paycheck, not poor, but definitely nowhere close to being comfortable. So Christmases we weren't abundant. We may have gotten one gift from our parents, one gift from Santa, and that would be it. Me and my brother were fine with it because we made do with what we had. And that's just what Christmas has always been to me. So it's just the thought that something like this is being taken away from us. Jesus, man. And it's being taken away by crazy goddamn fucks who just don't like it that in our country, in our part of the world, we celebrate something different. We believe something different. It is unacceptable. It just really drives me insane when this is the point that we've gotten to. Speaking of religion and, I guess religion and intolerance surrounding religion. The Middle East almost literally blew up over the last week. This has to do with Donald Trump naming Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. He's talking about how he was going to be moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And because of this, there were riots all over the Middle East and all over Israel and Palestine. It was ridiculous. There was fighting in East Jerusalem. And just in different cities around Jerusalem, around Israel. There was just riots breaking out, and it got violent. Tear gas was thrown. There was a few people ended up getting killed. Now, before we go any farther in the story, I think it's really dumb. I think it's really stupid that anybody thinks they can lay claim to a land simply because of an ancient religious book. If that you think that gives you the right, then I gotta say that is fucking stupid in my opinion. Because there's nothing, just because it's an ancient book, there's nothing in there that dictates that that means rightful ownership. And if that's the case, then why are we not talking about the poor people of Canaan? And the people of the Canaanites, were the ones that the Israelites slaughtered to take over the Holy Lands. There were, I believe, 3 different kingdoms. I can't remember the names of all of them, but I do know that one was the kingdom of Canaan. And in fact, God helped the Israelites destroy Canaan. Because at one point there was a battle, and Joshua, who was leading after Moses died, after he led them into the desert, they were there for 40 years apparently, and then they came out, and that was led by Joshua because Moses had passed by that point. Well, military historians first off believe that they weren't just chilling out in the desert for 40 years they wandered the desert for 40 years, but they were training an army that could go back and fight the war and take the land that was promised to them. So Joshua led them in, fought several different battles. I believe Joshua was the one who fought at the Battle of Jericho. But anyway, in one battle against the Canaanites, Joshua decided he was going to ambush the Canaanites. That's what he was going to do. So he marches forward about 1,000 of his Israelite soldiers to take to the battlefield. And then the Canaanites see that it's such a small army, and it encourages them to go forward, to fight on. Because they've been hearing all these stories up to this point about the Israelites, the unstoppable, invincible force of the Israelites. So when they show up, there's like 1,000 of them. They're easily outnumbered. They're saying, well, we can take them. Let's go. So what ends up happening is, as they descend on these 1,000 Canaanites, Joshua leads a counterattack from some bushes and some trees that were there. Most of his army is hiding there. They attack and they flank the enemy, the Canaanites, and they destroy them, take over the Holy Land. However, in this moment, Joshua asked God to hold the sun in its position. And because of this reason, it blinded the Canaanites from the Israeli advance. So that way the Canaanites wouldn't know they were there until they were descending right on top. Until they were like right on top of the Canaanites. So apparently in this story, God was more than willing to listen to Joshua and allow him to slaughter the Canaanites. So why are we not talking about them? Because they had original claim over the Holy Land. So what happened? They were there first. They may not have been technically the promised land to them, but they were there first. Isn't that the way we're playing this? And then Jerusalem itself has just been significant in all 3 of the Abrahamic religions for different reasons. The Israelites, the promised land, that would make sense. For the Christians, it was where Jesus ascended to heaven, where he taught and where he ascended to heaven. For the Muslims, it has to do with where Muhammad preached at. He preached at Jerusalem. That's why Jerusalem is the 3rd most holy site in Islam. But now Donald Trump goes and is the one who says that he's willing to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. And everywhere blows up. Al-Qaeda claimed a holy war against Trump because of this. The Middle East, the Palestinians, were all burning pictures of Netanyahu and Donald Trump, Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. And yeah, there was just a lot of riots throughout the rest of the day. And it even got so bad that rockets began firing in from Gaza over Israel. And Israel managed to Israel has good air defense. guns, so they managed to shoot down most of them. However, one did land in a neighborhood. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But then in retaliation the next day, which I believe was just this past Friday, I believe, Israel retaliated with an airstrike that ended up killing 2 of Hamas's soldiers and injured 25 more. It's unclear right now, I think. Maybe by now, I haven't seen it recently. But as far as I know, it's unclear whether those 25 injured are civilians or part of Hamas's military organization. But Gaza fired the rockets first after this went down into Israel. This was exactly the sort of thing that led to the 2014 war between Israel and Gaza. I think it was the 72-day war, if I remember correctly. It was the fact that Gaza kept firing missiles and rockets into Israel. There was like a week where this went by, and Israel then said, fuck it, we're going in. And then a lot of people condemned Israel for going into Gaza over this. But what the hell are they supposed to do when there's just missiles and rockets falling down like rain over their population? And the difference is Israel, from what I can tell, tries to use as much precision as possible. They go after military targets. For instance, this past Friday or Saturday, I can't remember which day it was, where they made their strike against Gaza, their airstrike, they hit a weapons depot. They didn't just go after civilians. They went and hit a weapons depot. The difference is that when Hamas started firing rockets into Israel, they weren't going after a military target or a political one. They went after civilians. They were firing these rockets down on neighborhoods with the explicit intention of killing Israeli civilians. That's the big difference between the two. During the 72-day war, Israel ended up, I think there was 2,500 Palestinian civilians killed during this time. Everyone criticized Israel over that. Nobody talked about the fact that Israel was sending out mass texts and phone calls to civilians in Gaza, telling them that they were going to be making airstrikes against them and attacks against them within the next few minutes and to get themselves out. Nobody talked about this. There was video evidence of missile batteries and artillery guns being set up in heavy civilian populated neighborhoods. And they were just firing off right from there. Hamas literally used their civilians as human shields. That's what they were doing because they knew that if they used them as human shields and Israel was suddenly killing off a bunch of civilians, then the world was going to turn on them. That the view of the world is going to say, well, look at these people killing civilians. When in fact, it was Hamas deliberately putting them in that position. And Israel's not perfect. Israel fucks up all the time. There was recently, within the last month or two, an article about an Israeli soldier that was sentenced to prison time for the murder of a Palestinian man. In this situation, a Palestinian man had tried to commit a knife attack, and he ended up getting shot and wounded in the process and dropped the knife, and he was down on the ground. The Israeli soldier approached him and then shot him again while he was on the ground with no knife. When people presented this, the first person I heard to present this was Abby Martin, who used to be for Russia Today. She was on the Joe Rogan podcast, pulled up the video, was talking about it, and she's very critical of Israel about what they do. And she talked about that, about how it was pure murder and sanctioned by the government, blah, blah, blah. Well, not only did the guy get arrested and charged over this, it was seen as unacceptable by the population, by the government, to the point where they actually sentenced him to prison. The other thing is what I had to find out on my own that she didn't mention was the fact that the guy was trying to do a knife attack. I thought this was a civilian Palestinian that this happened to, not doing anything, minding his own business, and then gets gunned down by an Israeli soldier. No, turned out he was trying to do a knife attack. Big difference between the two. That doesn't excuse the fact that the Israeli soldier murdered him, but that's a key point a key piece of information you might want to put in. Just recently, within these riots going on, there have been a few people that were killed, but there was one report that came out where an Israeli soldier shot and killed a Palestinian man who turned out not to have a knife or anything like that. So Israel fucks up, don't get me wrong. But everybody, I find, picks and chooses, and essentially they cherry pick these stories and say, look at what happened here, but they don't give much context as to what was going on beforehand. Personally, I haven't heard too much about what's really gone down in Palestine and Israel. People kind of spoke about it for the first couple days, then they just talked about like shitting on Trump for doing it and how all of Trump's allies are against this decision. But nobody's really talking about a lot of the attacks that are going on in Israel right now. In fact, it was the Israel Times where I'm getting most of this information. I'm not even getting it from Western news sources. This isn't CBC, this isn't CTV, this isn't MSNBC, Fox News, CNN, or any of those other ones. This is Israel Times. It was completely coincidental because when I was on there, I accidentally, they say, do you want to allow them access to information? And I accidentally clicked yes instead of no. So they start sending me, all new articles and stuff and updates, and that's where I've been getting most of my information. It's actually been quite helpful. But if you actually pay attention to what's going on, Israel is always having knife attacks. They're always having bus bombs and this and that and the other going on against them. And I mean, people talk about the illegal occupation of Palestine, the West Bank. People talk about this occupation, but they don't really talk about the history that went in to how this happened. They just say that Israel is in occupied territories. They are an occupying force. Nobody really talks about how in the war where Israel ended up taking the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which they have returned since then to the Palestinians back in 2006, which since then they've just loaded it up on fucking rockets and missiles and shit. They haven't really built themselves up into anything. But during that time, 3 nations were prepared to go in and destroy Israel. Back in, I think it was 1966 when the war happened. It was Egypt, Jordan, and was it possibly Syria? They were planning to move in and destroy Israel. 3 armies were amassing on Israel's border, and Israel decided to say, fuck it, we're going in, we're doing a preemptive strike. In their preemptive strike that they made against Egypt, they managed to take out most of Egypt's air force, which actually bought them an advantage because Israel had a strong air force even in that time. So they were managed to destroy I think it was the air base that was just along their border, which gave them a significant advantage. And then when this happened, that's when Israel said, fuck it, we're going in. They attacked Palestine and Jordan, and this is when the West Bank ended up falling in Israel's control. When all the dust settled on the war, Israel retained control of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So the difference is Israel did take that land. Don't get me wrong, Israel did not originally own the West Bank nor Gaza. They went in with force and took it. But that was just when they seemed to be on the point of genocide. 3 armies that hated Israel. And with the history that the Muslims have with the Jews, I'm sure Israel did not feel super confident in their chances of, just being a subjugated force. They were probably worried of being completely wiped off the map. So they went in and they made their attacks. One thing about taking land is it was a show of force. You took someone's land because it showed that you were bigger and stronger, and it was also sort of a fuck you to all your enemies around you, telling you, don't you come at me, this is going to happen to you too. So that's what I think Israel did. So I'm not going to I know I seem very defensive of Israel. Israel has fucked up, and Israel has done plenty of bad shit. But I find everybody tends to ignore what is actually thrown back at Israel. The shit that they've got to deal with. The fact that their people every single one of their citizens has to do mandatory military service. They do this because they're in such a dangerous situation. Not because it's cool, yo. I honestly feel that when Israel returned Gaza to the Palestinians, Gaza was a much smaller piece of land than the West Bank. I truly believe that this was Israel's sort of experiment. They say, what would happen if we gave up this land and we returned to Israel, gave up the West Bank and Gaza? So I think what ended up happening is they gave it up because there's been a lot of international pressure on them to do this, to get out of these occupied territories, as everyone else classifies it. I think when they removed it out of Gaza, it was a test to see how things would go. And since then, they've just seen how essentially Gaza built up themselves along the border and prepared to strike Israel at every single opportunity. So now, if they pull out of the West Bank, what is most likely going to happen? What is most likely going to happen? Probably the same thing. And we also cannot, when we are discussing what's going on in Israel and Palestine in the Middle East, we cannot go without mentioning what I believe this one may have actually been the Hezbollah's 3 no's. But essentially, the 3 no's were either Hamas or Hezbollah's rules when dealing with Israel. Those 3 no's were no recognition of Israel, no peace with Israel, and no negotiation with Israel. While Hamas and Hezbollah may have lightened up their stances against Israel in recent days, they're still extremely harsh for their policy against Israel is still extremely harsh, to the point where it's not exactly an incentive for Israel to give up the Western Bank. Whenever this report came out that Hezbollah was going to be lightening their stance on Israel, people treated it as if it was like, we're seeing new ground being made. It sounded a little, wow, maybe we're seeing the start of peace negotiations or something. Yeah, it turned out they pretty much said, okay, well, maybe we won't destroy Israel. That was pretty much their change. It's like, yeah, we still feel the same way about them. We hate them and everything. We want to fight them, but maybe we won't wipe them off the face of the earth. Oh, how generous of you to not commit genocide. Was that hard for you? I'm so sorry. The other thing is growing up, I never had much of an opinion on the Palestinian-Israel situation until, again, I started getting more and more interested in politics when I got older. One thing that, though, as I have sort of taken a more solid position on what goes on in Israel and Palestine, and I found myself more on Israel's side, one of the reasons for this was actually in a podcast, one of Sam Harris's podcasts, one of his early ones back in the day, a few years ago. I think during this time, it was during the 2014 war. And so I believe he was asked the question is, why does he support Israel? He says, he's like, well, think about it this way. He says, if tomorrow the Palestinians decided that they were going to lay down their arms and they're not going to fight anymore, what would happen? Probably nothing. Probably just life, sort of like how things are going now in Israel and Palestine would probably be what happened if that was the decision. On the other side, what would happen if Israel lay down their arms tomorrow and said, we're not going to fight anymore? Israel would probably be wiped off the map within 24 hours. And I actually agree with that. And I think that's a realistic time frame, that if Israel said they weren't fighting, I think 24 hours is a realistic time frame, because Israel's not very big. It really isn't. If you take out the West Bank and everything, when Israel's original size, when it was founded, it was only about 6 miles thick. Like, you could only go across 6 miles from the Gulf, and then you'd be entering Palestine. So it's not very big. So 24 hours seems like a very realistic possibility. And I do think that's what would happen. With the foreign policies that others have towards Israel, especially all the surrounding nations of Israel, what their foreign policy is towards the Israelites, or not the Israelites, the Israelis, they're not the Israelites. I really can't help but feel that's exactly what would happen. So between everything, I find myself leaning to more in support of Israel, just in general, for that very reason. However, what Trump said was fucking dumb, and why I've said before that he is terrible on the international stage. We knew this is what was going to be the result. We knew that if they said that Jerusalem was the capital of Israel, the capital of the only Jewish country in the world, surrounded by Muslim countries, then we knew the Muslims would be pissed, and we knew they would revolt. You know, it's a little while ago, I was taking a cab home. Can't really remember where I was now, but I was talking to the cabbie, and he was a Muslim, and he ended up talking, essentially he went off about Donald Trump and about like just the way, essentially he said like Donald Trump and them are the evil ones, Zionists really hate Jews, Islam is a religion of peace, blah 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 blah. And that was weird about the Zionist part too. He said Zionists are not Jews, in fact Zionists hate Jews. I was like, okay. Every single president who has been in power has been a Protestant. Not exactly true. I looked that part up. But he went on and on about this. But ever since I've had that conversation with the cab driver, I've seen more and more shit like this. I'm like, you want me to believe that Islam is a religion of peace, yet I keep hearing attacks that are coming and things like this where there are riots going around because Jerusalem is now the capital of Israel. So just recently with the riots that happened, it brought me back to that conversation with the dude, and I was just thinking, man, would his opinion be different now if what has happened over the last month or so since I've had that conversation with him, if he'd still come back to me and say, you still stand by your opinion, bud? I get the feeling he would, although I'd just drives me insane watching this, especially because it's completely a religious argument. Both claims on both sides are being made strictly under a historical religious basis. That's it, which is not a good enough excuse for me, not a good enough reason for me to give land to one side or the other. But if we are playing by those rules, then the Jews win, because their religion goes back to about 1800 BC, roughly. Christians don't come in until about 2,000 years ago, and then Islam doesn't come in until about 600, 700 AD. So there is like almost a 2,000-year difference between the two religions. So in this claim, if we are playing by the rules of ancient religious books, then Israel wins. And Jerusalem is the rightful city of the Jews, not the Muslims. So probably not a very popular opinion, and I wonder if I'm going to get any shit for this podcast for saying stuff like this. This will be interesting. But I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion, and I'll see you all soon.